never nothing. People quit to blow your brains when you shine. Know you running, ain't no time to entertain. You go grind if you want it. Bullets in the rain, you can sign for 100. I swear the way we living ain't right. Ain't right. Ain't right.
You got dreams ahead of you. Is you going to chase it, or you just going to sit there and let them go past? Life can change in a matter of seconds based on your decisions you make.
Try to ride me, you better hit a pop. You better pray to God you never get your Glock stuck, cause I'm a bang bang like it's Friday when it's pops.
Baltimore is a beautiful city, but it has its angels on the shoulders, meaning the good one, the bad one. They got them people that's going to motivate you, and it's got the people that's going to bring you down. Some people bring you down with them, some people bring you down, but show you there's a better route. The best thing about Baltimore is making it out of Baltimore.
Bleed the same blood, ain't no way I'm getting rocked up. Call your little sister, she'll tell you who got knocked up. Dang. She'll tell you who got knocked up.
A lot of children in the city, children going through these poverty things, these poverty levels, just getting to high school, getting out of high school is a struggle in itself.
Come here. Let me see your page. It's right there. No. Go back to play.
One time, school was the answer to everything. Like, you have to go to school. But for these kids going through so much, school not the answer no more. Standing outside on the corner is the answer.
Where's your page? What that for?
You're fighting against a whole lot, trying to help change these children's lives. But at the end of the day, you got to keep sending that message. Like, they had to go through something to get to where they are.
I wasn't here yesterday. I had to go to work.
No, y'all killing me with this attendance.
Like, I done seen a lot of young males die. Some of them my family, some of them not. Some of them homeboys, some of them people I don't even know. There was the OG that I knew from my neighborhood. He got shot like on the corner of my block. My homeboy Nino, homeboy Kamani, P, D-Money, D, Emmanuel. It's just too much to remember. Like, every
Good evening. Welcome to 60 Minutes in Black USA. My name's Mike Haney. Hope you enjoyed that opening clip of some kids talking about how it is out there on the streets, and some of their teachers talking about what it is and what it used to be. I'm happy to have join us today the former mayor of Baltimore, matter of fact, the first female mayor of Baltimore, Mayor Sheila Dixon. I'll tell you why I still call her mayor. Every time I see her, I call her mayor, because she commands that much respect, not only from me, but a multitude of people in our city. And the reason that we've asked Mayor Dixon will be joining us today, Michael Eugene Johnson, who's a broadcaster and community activist, is to give us a perspective of urban cities in America. Memphis, Birmingham, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, all share with the same issues in our cities, particularly in the Black community: economic disparity, law and justice issues, and what do we do about education. But let me bring Mayor Dixon online. Mayor, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And want to just ask you for a couple of minutes just to share with the viewers what's been going on with you, because I know quite a few people love you and they want to know what's happening with you, and to be able to bring our viewers from across the country where Mayor Dixon is. When I was doing some research on you, Mayor, quite a few articles in Florida, California on Mayor Dixon and her perspective on policing, which we'll talk about a little later. But tell us what's been going on with you.
So I've been very busy. I mean, I think it's just in my DNA to be active in the community, working with minority companies, particularly African-American companies, helping them to reach and move to another level. Just in the last 6 months, we had one of our members at the Maryland Minority Contractors, Robin Harrington, who just had been trying to for several years, because he was a product of Baltimore City Public Schools, trying to create a training program for underground utilities. And I was able to connect him to the school system. He connected with Maryville and 2 other high schools to enhance their curriculum. And what was interesting is he this summer opened up a school with his own money, paying the students in the program. But what's interesting, and when I was listening to some of the young people on the video, what's interesting is that he's had a challenge with keeping these young people in his program, and he pays them to be a part of it. And underground utility, you can make a lot of money because you have either moms, you have to, and he believes in you going down underground, learning what's happening underground. And what he found was that either young people did not want to go down in there because of the weather, too hot, or the parent didn't want them digging up, even though they're at Maryville and they're in the plumbing program. But that's just an example of how we got to start changing our mindset. So I'm doing that, and then I'm also still working on a project in the 21217 area, the Bethel Wellness and Empowerment Center. We've been working on raising money to get that center open, where it will allow individuals within that community, in that catchment area of Upton, to be able to get access to not only programs to help them to become empowered, but also health is a big issue. So doing that, on the board with that, and it's been a challenge trying to get this last bit of capital money to get the building finished. And then, during COVID, you just try to stay healthy, and of course, my exercise program, which has intensified, and so and then just putting out a lot of fires as relates to our companies, either with the city, with payment, or other challenges that some of my clients have had. So it's been busy, pretty busy.
Wow, man. Well, it sounds like it's been busy. One thing I didn't know your mother was described as a community activist. Is that correct?
Yep, that's where I got
So
it
it's in your
from.
DNA. It's in your DNA
It
to be a
is.
community
It is.
activist, right? Wow. What were
Yep.
some of the things that your mother did, if I could ask for a moment, from a historical
S-
perspective? What were
s-
some of the things she did?
So as a child, my mom used to be a leader with the Girl Scouts and the Bluebirds. And then in school, she was very active as a parent liaison, where she was working with parents, which is interesting because they got rid of those really good programs that help young parents in particular. And then she was very active in our church, Bethel AME Church, with the women's ministry, the international ministry, women's ministry, under the leadership of Reverend Cecilia Bryant. That's kind of how I decided to really take that leap of faith and to run for city council as a result of that women's ministry, and have an opportunity to travel to Kenya and other places, along with my mother. So she was doing a lot in the community, but a lot around women issue. She was appointed under Mayor Schmoke in the Women's Commission, and was very active with that as well. She was pretty active.
Wow, wow, that's
Yeah,
fantastic,
yeah,
man. So there's a
yeah.
history in that. You talked about exercise, and I'm going to bring some of this stuff up during the course of the interview with you. But I want to bring on Michael Johnson. But before I do so, the first time I really had an opportunity to meet and interact with you was at the Tremont Hotel after you'd just been elected. When I was running that hotel, man, in your presence, when you walked into the room, I was getting ready to hand you the keys of the hotel. I mean, and it was just some persona about you and being in charge. I don't know if it had to do with because you felt you were a woman, whatever. It was a persona that everyone felt a comfort level with having you in charge. Your entourage was behind you, and you walked into that Tremont, man, and you were stepping, and it was a pleasure to see a woman of color in charge. And then another quick story, you and I, along with Attorney Franklin Lee, went to Congress, went to DC to see Congressman Sarbanes and Congressman Elijah Cummings, and we sat in a corner of the Rayburn reception room, and then comes walking by Nancy Pelosi, and I said, oh my goodness, she walks just like Sheila Dixon, and so that power behind her, and the power behind you, that led people to be comfortable with the leadership. And we'll talk about some of the leadership styles, some of the leadership way. We'll look at other communities of color around the country to see what type of leadership they had as well. But let me bring in another Mike Johnson.
Yes.
How you doing,
Good evening. Go Ravens.
Yeah, go Ravens. Yeah, they
Man,
won
they want to
today.
give
They
you a
pulled out
heart
a
attack.
close one.
They give you
Yeah.
a heart attack. It's good medication. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael, for having me on, and thank you for having.
Thank you, Mike. I couldn't
and-
think of any other way, because I know how Sheila or Mayor Dixon describes. She says, "Here come the Michaels." As we
Yes, I
advocated for a
know.
multitude of
I
things, she
know.
says, "Well, the Michaels." So here we go again. And today it's a bit different seat from you, as you sit with Mayor Dixon, and we talk about some of the issues in our community, and ask you your opinion and advice as a community activist yourself, because in your own right, you're a staunch activist, have been so since the 70s, really, when you came out of high
Since
school.
high school.
And high school, he was an activist, man, a big
Yeah.
bushy head activist. But Mike, what have you been up to lately, man? I know you still got that energy, and you're out here trying to make things happen in our community. What's going on with you, Mike?
Well, just like the Mayor Dixon had just said, sometimes we think that when all of this went down, we were going to get maybe a little less work. It seems like we're working more. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of teaching going on. I mean, I am troubled by the continued comment sometimes from some younger folk who say that all of the problems is because of our contemporaries or our generations, without even asking for our advice on everything. But I find myself doing a lot of the work that I continue to do, if it's even in education, if it's even in the community level, or just happen to be helping out a lot of individuals. I always get a call when someone say, oh, I saw Sheila Dixon, I saw Mayor Dixon, and I just think about what all of the work that you guys have done. But I am troubled by where we are here in the city. I'm troubled by leadership or absence thereof. I never feel that, for me, I'll speak personally for me, I never felt that Sheila Dixon had lost any of the last two elections. I think there was things that was done, but that's just my comment. But I'm just as busy, and like Sheila had mentioned, in reference to my mother and my father who worked with A. Philip Randolph in the Pullman Train Union when he was in Chester, South Carolina, up and down the rails. And my mama was one of the members of 1199E when they were trying to integrate when they were trying to unionize the nurses at Johns Hopkins University, which still exists today. They're still actually struggling with that same thing. So we all come from, and even Michael, I know of you, all of us come from people who did the work before us, and it made us a lot in what we are today. So I am blessed with what my parents was able to do for me and 11 other kids, and what President Dixon and Michael Haney's parents and folks were able to do for us. And if we just had other people kind of maybe asking for advice, because it's not as if the mayor is going to give some bad advice. It's not as if I'm going to give some bad advice or you're going to give some bad advice, but I am troubled by where we are in the city. It's not because because we've seen these numbers. Now, we stopped seeing these numbers under the last numbers, when I mean murder numbers of Mayor Dixon's term. But since then, to have that 300 as some sort of magical number without, really discussing how did we get here. And then to have these conversations that are either being used or shared online is troubling for me. I feel I'm sad about Baltimore City today.
Well, I appreciate
Yeah,
that. You
yeah.
know, in the larger context of things, you know, one of the Mayor Dixon is in Birmingham, Mayor Dixon is in Detroit. As we have a following across the country, Mayor Dixon is in St. Louis in terms of the issues in urban Black communities being very similar. You know, and we can talk about what those are because as we deal with the 300 murders this week that we crossed that threshold, I was reading in Memphis, Tennessee, where a killing of a rapper, you know, down there, Young Dolph, um, and some of the issues relative to homicides and murder in our community, you know, and in St. Louis, the same thing in our community. Baltimore and St. Louis represent the 15th and 23rd dangerous cities based on the per capita homicide rate in the world and are number 1 and 3 in the country. And my point and purpose in bringing you to is to look at the fixes. You know, we have to stop looking at the blame game, but look at the fixes. I know when Mayor Dixon was mayor, she incorporated certain strategies which brought us probably to this date some of the lowest homicide rates in the history of Baltimore. And is that a roadmap elsewhere in the country as well? Because we're losing Black people left and right. And before I ask you guys a question, here's a comment from a judge, which was compelling to me. The judge said down in Tennessee, he says Black on Black crime would put the Klan to shame. Okay? He said that the way that Black people kill each other, the Klan couldn't do any justice to it. In other words, we do a better job with Black on Black crimes, particularly Black young men, than the Klan ever had hoped to gain by killing us the way that they did back in the 30s, 40s, etc. But Mayor Dixon, let me ask you first. When you were mayor, you know, it was a focus of yours, crime, which was an issue then when we were a city of probably a couple 100,000 more. What were some of the best practices you incorporated? What were some of your beliefs in terms of policing back then?
So coming out of a administration, the O'Malley administration, who really felt that locking up everybody, even for nuisance crime, was going to be the answer because, you know, at that time, their goal was to reduce crime and they focused on a number. But I think for me, growing up here in Baltimore, going to Baltimore City Public Schools, um, kind of understanding, even though, you know, I've had some friends that would tease me and said that, you know, I was naive and I was sitting on the step, which was true. You know, I did a lot of sitting on the steps and I was naive, but I realized that if we didn't take a holistic approach in how we deal with this crime, we can't lock our way out of it, but you got to go after folks who commit certain crimes. No ifs, ands, or buts. But the biggest part for me was every level of government taking on their responsibility in this process. And I keep saying this over and over and over when I go on different radio shows like WBAL or whatever, or WEAA or WOLB. We have every level has a responsibility. The police have a role. They need to be out there, walking the beat, talking to folks, getting to know each other because they're human. You know, they live in the city, some of them, and they have families. But if you're not out there talking, learning the beat, and I had a couple officers who retired who helped me with my executive protection. They weren't the executive protection team, but they had been through that process. And I listened to those officers where their territories that they were responsible for, they got to know the people, they got to know the businesses, they were able to communicate, they were able to get information that normally would not be able to gotten because people felt comfortable with them. And so really trying to get our officers to understand that you got to get out in the neighborhood, you got to get to know the folks, you got to gain that trust back. But also communicating with the state's attorney's office, where when we do these arrests, and at that time it was Pat Jessamy, and I asked Pat Jessamy, I said, what's the weaknesses that you see from the police department that can help improve this process when they come to the state's attorney's office. And at that time, I don't know what the issues are now, but at that time, she says it's how officers wrote reports. And so she set up a training program for officers and showing them how to write the reports correctly. But we were communicating. And what I said to Pat Jessamine at the time and our commissioner, I said, look, we don't have to love each other. We don't have to like each other. But what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? What is it that is what do we need to do at the police department? What do we see from the state's attorney's office? Okay, at the state level, what's going on parole and probation? How are you monitoring people that are on parole? What is the plan of action? I guess as a teacher, I always believe that you need to have a plan when you graduate. You went to Northwestern, Michael went to Northwestern. In my class, which was the best class, we had a plan of action. We graduated, no matter if it was to go to work or go to college or go into the military, you left there with a plan. All right, somebody's on parole. You don't have a job. You're not doing this. You need your GED, whatever. To bang on that door, work with those individuals. So really get to know those individuals at an intimate level. And then the court system. Okay, what's the problem? Once the state's attorney does their job and the police, what has to happen here? So that communication was very important because I had sat through for 12 years as city council president on the criminal coordinating council. And we would meet, these are public meetings where every public safety entity is at the table. But instead of people facing their strengths and weaknesses, it was always pointing the finger. So one thing that I said, this is not how we're going to operate. We've got to look at each other and look at what our goals are. On top of what can we do to prevent things? You know, that's why we created Safe Streets. And when we did the Safe Streets, we went after individuals who were part of that element in their community. It's a little different now. Safe Streets got a little political. It was not in City Hall. It was outside, run by a nonprofit. And those individuals who we hired or the organization hired, they lived in that community. So you wouldn't have somebody in Brooklyn who came from Park Heights working in Brooklyn, because those people in Park Heights don't know the people down in Brooklyn. Then we had the gun registry where we, you know, if you were arrested, you had to register that gun and we checked on you. Then our federal partner, we got them engaged and involved. So we had all those pieces, but keep in mind, we still did some preventive things. I remember at a cabinet meeting, Dr. Ross Ford, I don't know if y'all remember Dr. Ford, Ross Ford, who was a psychologist. He and Salima came up with family strengthening, going into prisons, working with individuals before they come out, so that when they come out, we can connect them with their families, but we could also figure out what will it take to get them on the right path. And most of the cabinet would look at this when they would explain it, and it's like, okay, well, what does this have to do with picking up trash or generating taxes and blah, blah, blah. Well, the ultimate goal is you get this individual back out there to become a productive citizen. You know, we created some programs in the middle school. It was an issue with young people, particularly women. A principal in Cherry Hill was telling me that young women in middle school were starting to be disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. We got some grant money and we gave it to some mentors who went into the worst, and we wanted the worst of the young ladies in those schools. It was called Women in Action. It wasn't called Mayor Dixon. It was called Women in Action. And they began to work. And when those young people went to high school, we had them commit to go back. So we try to do preventive things on top of, you know, working with the judicial systems that are out there to get each other to talk, but also to take on their responsibility in this process. The unfortunate thing is, what I see in Baltimore is when I left, Stephanie was still following that system, but then the politics began when they got rid of Fred Billfell and his name escapes me.
That's the old police commissioner, right? The old police
right,
commissioner.
but the commissioner was also getting his deputies ready, Barksdale ready to take over.
Barksdale.
Then we went to California, and Bats came, and that consistency hasn't been ever since. The other part too is, as a mayor, and or whatever, whenever you get into politics and in a political position, you gotta take the time to understand and learn the systems that you're dealing with and be willing to take those kind of risks. But see, we lost that consistency. And so she had 2 good years, and then Freddie Gray. I'm convinced to this day that if we were still following that model, that incident would not have happened with Freddie Gray. Because one of the things that I kept emphasizing to our command staff and I would go to the districts and talk to the officers because I wanted their input. I wanted them to understand what we were trying to get involved, accomplish, and get their input. And I also shared with them what we were not going to tolerate. We weren't going to tolerate abuse. We weren't going to tolerate certain things, and but I got their feedback in that process, along with the union. You're not going to always agree, but you got to have them at the table, talking, and conversing and getting their input. And that's been missing for a number of years as well.
Let me ask another question, and maybe Mike can answer this, and you can also, Mayor. Opportunity, right? They say that the opportunity and the despair with Black people in the community, right? What are the root causes of Black on Black crime? What's the root causes?
Well, first thing, I don't believe that there's a Black on Black crime. What I believe is that there's crime of opportunity because
Well, what's murder?
Well, as I'm saying, is that what happens is people who live close to people have a tendency to be a lot more disruptive to the people they live close to. So if we lived in, if this was a majority white area, then do we call white on white crime? We don't say that. I'm just saying that there are lack of opportunities have always been a thrust and a forward movement on the reason we have a lot of crimes. And what the mayor has not said is that when she got into office, she also opened the doors. And what I say is open the gates. There was conversations. There were conversations between community groups and the police department. There was conversations between activists and police departments, so that there was starting to be a sense of family, even if we were on 2 sides of the rail. Even if the police were misbehaving, there were enough police that we could always go to who were behaving. And that was because the mayor set the standards. And, she literally said the buck rests with her. Now, we've been through as many school superintendents, as police commissioners, as mayors. And all of that doesn't handle well when you're trying to build this family back up. So I just saying that there's a lot of lack of opportunity, but that lack of opportunity start with bad schools and the mishandling of some of these neighborhoods. One of the things that I always, and if I haven't said it to her before, that I appreciated that Mayor Dixon's done is she started cleaning up the city. I mean, the city was filthy at one time. And when she was showing up at the trash removal places, she wasn't showing up in a dress. She had on her orange jumpsuit and she would have on her be riding the trash trucks, but you gave the folks a sense of pride within our communities. When people don't have no pride in your schools, when you have no pride in your communities, you have crime. Very few good neighborhoods has crimes. But the problem is that the neighborhoods and the services are now become too political. Trash removal is political now. Who would ever think that trash removal would be political? And so when you politicize all of the things that people expect leadership to do and government to do, and then one of the things that I know that Mayor Dixon will agree with me on, every time we had something at work, somebody had to come in there and try something new. Well, sometimes you keep the things that work.
Right. And
you add on to that.
Right. You build on it.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that young people that go into politics, I try to share that as well. I say that if it's like CityStat, I was real skeptical with CityStat when the O'Malley administration created it, because I talked to people and they use it as a tool. In some ways, the department heads use it to embarrass or abuse it. But I said, okay, let's switch. Let's change that around. CityStat is a good way to track, Let's bring everybody to the table who needs to be there and track it, but get their engagement and involvement. And okay, we got vacant houses. All right. From housing perspective, since this is your expertise, what things do you see needs to be done? And when those ideas come out, we begin to track it. It's just, it's same thing with crime, etc. So we used it to really track where we were making progress and where we weren't. And where we weren't, we said, okay, what do we need to do differently? So yeah, it's a
Well,
lot.
Mayor
You have to
Dixon,
juggle a lot.
let me transition for a second here because, and we're going to go to our halfway break. It's amazing how quickly time flies before we go to economics and education. But I heard a interview with you not too long ago where you felt like I felt. You felt like you were afraid, like I am, of becoming a victim of crime. Do you recall those comments that you made relative to that? And is that where we are? Because at the end of the day, I think our viewers and people in the multitude of cities across the country that look like us want to know what the fixes are to stop the murders of black on black murders of crime. Maybe you don't stop it all, but you can eradicate it to a point. And is there an economic disparity that figures in that well? And what do we need to do with that correlation of economics, crime, education, and what's that roadmap? So I want to come back and talk about that. But talk to me about the fear that you expressed of being a victim, as I feel the same way you do.
Well, I've been a victim multiple times where I've had a number of break-ins in my home. And when somebody invades your home and goes through your drawers and actually comes through your house, that in itself is scary. And little incidents that were going on in our neighborhood. It's more quality of life issues in the Hunting Ridge area, particularly, it's like we're kind of a little island from down Emerson Avenue, but we have our share of incidents. I just started looking behind more often than I had in the past. And of course you want to be careful and you want to be safe, but I never ever felt that I had to look behind always, or if somebody walks up on you, just kind of put myself on guard because you just don't know. And I don't like that feeling because I felt that even outside of being in public office, I didn't always have my executive protection with me, because they have families and they had lives. But even, when I would go to the supermarket and somebody said, well, you don't have the executive protection. I was like, they don't need to take me to the supermarket. I could take myself to the supermarket, and of course, while you're in there, somebody has an issue or a problem, but you listen. But I just started feeling just a little paranoid. And I had to kind of really search myself to figure out what that was. And I just kind of prayed about it and refused to, not that I'm not gonna, be careful, but I just refused to kind of be in that mindset and that state, because it wasn't a good feeling when you feel
I appreciate
afraid.
that. I appreciate that because, I think people are feeling that things are out of control. I wish I had executive protection to go some of the places that I go because it's just out of control, and how do we bring it back whole? And maybe we can talk about it, in the next half hour because I've got a special person. I hope he's still in the room that I want to bring on because I think at a point we've got to begin to listen to our young people, particularly those that have been out there. But first, just a couple of infomercials. 60 Minutes in Black USA is on the Black USA Network. Donnie Glover, our publisher or founder, created this network so that we can figure out as communities across the USA how to talk to each other. So how to talk with each other and to each other about issues that are common to us. We're broadcasting out of Oakland. On Fridays, we've got Black USA Crypto with Kamal. On Thursdays at 7 p.m., we have Black Business Roundtable with Doug. At 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, we have Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamar. And the Donnie Glover Show with Mr. Glover himself on Tuesday evenings at 7. In addition to Mr. Glover has from 10 until 7 every Monday through Friday, Black USA News morningshow.com. So this is also a pitch for those of you that may want to do a sports show that have the qualifications and ability. We'd like to see a cooking show, a show that fits and could give our community information that we can share across the USA. I'd like to bring in a young man. He had asked me to come on the show because he felt he wanted to be heard. He's actually a publisher. He's been out there. And he wanted to ask a question of this panel, relative to community, etc. So Darius Gisentana. Darius, did I pronounce that name correctly? Gisentana?
Yes, you did,
Gisentana?
brother. Yes, you did.
I
You pronounced it
appreciate
correctly.
that. And Darius, if you go on Darius's page, and Darius, I'm gonna throw it right on up here, man, because Darius describes himself. When we looked at that video at the top of the hour, it was compelling to hear the young people speak and the discouragement at the end. But this is how Darius describes himself. Darius is an ex-dope boy, rehabilitated gangster and author. Darius, what does that mean?
I just been through everything that Baltimore and a lot of other surrounding cities, the oppression from the police department to our own Black people. I've been through that being raised in West Baltimore. I took that anger and I rehabilitated by writing books and moving forward with my life.
But you described yourself as a rehabilitated gangster. Give us a suggestion as a communities, right? Because you're just an example of what could happen and what had happened. That's not only in Baltimore, it's in Detroit, it's in Chicago, it's in New York. What did it take? What did you do to decide to want to turn your life around?
Well, it all started with a few years back, I believe 2008, with Sheila Dixon's good old VPU, Violent Prevention Unit. I was placed on that as a young man. I was sent to multiple programs. The schedule kept me busy and out of the streets. So I had time to find a craft to readjust properly in society.
And you said in one of your quotes, I just really have to be a great example for my nephews and the youth in Baltimore City. People look up to me because of evil. I got to show them there's a better way regardless. So now you're a model of example. Before I get you to ask your question, so you've written 5 books, right? You're an author.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about that one book that I saw. What's it called?
Maryland Massacre.
Yeah, absolutely, man. What's up with that in a short little synopsis?
Long story short, I've been running so much campaigns and promotions for that. It's actually a trilogy. Maryland Massacre 1 is a trilogy. It's about inside of the city, a couple. They go through some things here and there, and I just can't explain it because it's spoilers. It's so action-packed. If I say too much, it's the story. It's the story.
I hear you. So how do our viewers get your book?
You can go on Amazon.com and request for part 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, and I'm gonna put your information up in the chat in a second. But because I agreed, and you and I are getting to know each other, and we had a conversation, and so you wanted to ask a question of Mike and Mayor Dixon. So here you go. Here's your opportunity, man.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. My first question is for Ms. Dixon. Now, through the years of 2007 and 2010, the crime rate decreased each year that you were in office. Now, do you feel as though that you can take that same crime fighting strategy and go to other cities and states like Louisiana and Oakland where it's needed and maybe get a position there and get things under control in those areas also?
So it is a strategy that could work anywhere, and I believe that I've talked with former mayors through the U.S. Conference of Mayors in the past about utilizing some of those strategies, because what happens is, what we did was we took some best practices from different cities, like in New York, the gun registry under Mayor Bloomberg, the whole corridor 95 pipe corridor where guns were coming up and down 95. We utilized that strategy. We went to Chicago to look at the safe streets concept and brought that to Baltimore. So it could work in other cities. It could work in Baltimore as well. I think it's just a matter of taking some of the issues today, particularly with more mental health issues that are impacting our community and the resources needed, and incorporating that even more, intensifying that. It's just like the program that you went through. I mean, you said it very clearly. You had a plan. You were kept busy. That's why when people say that we don't have resources or opportunities out here, I always have to say, y'all got more resources. Mike, they got more resources today than we've ever had.
I mean,
more today than ever, but it's how you get access and how you make that commitment to it.
Okay, true.
What's your next question, Darius?
Your book too. I wrote that.
Yeah, I got some information up here. It's compelling. Right. It's a compelling book. What's your next question, Darius?
My next question, as far as Ms. Dixon, the vaccination rate that's going on and everything, everyone's getting vaccinated. There are some people that's less fortunate. Well, as you see, a lot of people that's less fortunate to even get vaccinated. Do you think there's a plan to get that in effect within the middle of next year to get Baltimore back running safely and healthy?
So it doesn't matter. Nobody's everybody can get vaccinated. You can get vaccinated for free. It's really about where people's level of misinformation versus information from the scientists and the doctors, and not necessarily listening to some of the myths that are out there, and people have to feel comfortable with it. But sometimes people go to one extreme to the other, but the opportunities are there. People can go Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturday to the state office building and get vaccinated if they choose to. So, I mean, it's just about educating folks about, I believe it's important to get vaccinated. I also believe that we're not going to get out of this to the level that we need to unless more people get vaccinated. But also people also have to start living healthier. That's why when we talk about the disparities come into the lifestyles that we live. I am a proponent of trying to live a healthy life. It's what you eat, how you think, exercising, what you drink, what you smoke, all of that's a contributing factor. And we as African Americans in particular, there are a lot of illnesses that we face that can be reduced by diet and exercise. Diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. All of those are factors that can help. And the same thing with the vaccination. Why we tend to die at a higher rate is because of other illnesses that we have, or that causes us to pass away. But I hope we do get beyond this, and I hope people can realize that this is an opportunity to really open our eyes up to, one, having a balance of quality healthcare for everybody. Not just those who have great medical plans, but every citizen.
Fantastic. Darius, I'm going to let you ask a question of Mr. Johnson, if you have one, and give a final remark. I've got like 2 questions I got to get to these good people with as well. But you got a question for Mr. Johnson as well?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, young fellow.
Okay, I see you went to College Park, African American Studies.
Yes, I was there too. Yeah.
Now, my main question I wanted to ask for you, do you see any type of way to get more African American studies within our elementaries, not just all throughout the world, in our elementaries and middle schools? Because as you've seen, them books aren't accurate, as you and I know.
Well, it's all about the will of leadership. If leadership has that will and says, this is what we're going to teach. It's like when people are saying that we're changing history. We're not saying that George Washington wasn't the first president and wasn't a good general. We just said he also owned 300 slaves. So we just want to make sure that we have a sense of balance. And I think that there is African-American history in every subject that is being taught, science and math and English and history. And so you just need to incorporate that. And that, for me, the entire school system curriculum needs to be blown up. I mean, we're talking about a 21st century school we're building, but we're still teaching 1950s classes. As Mayor Dixon and Michael Haney has always said, it seems like that the school was also part of the community. And by being part of the community, you never had a lot of parents that showed up at PTA meetings in high school. So all of that yin yang that people throw out there about, parents not sure, they never showed up in high school anyway. Personally, I don't think my parents ever showed up. They were just glad we went to school.
Mine did.
Yeah, Sheila's mother was the only one up at Northwestern at the time. Now, junior high, I'm only kidding. Junior high and elementary school, well, junior high was called, but elementary school and middle school is the time that parents really have to assist in molding their children, and the school system has to prepare them. I have never seen so many children being an educator in high school who were unprepared to even be in high school. And so to get back to your original question, which is a great question, is that it's about leadership. If leadership makes the decision that African-American studies should be taught in the schools at every curriculum level, and I know Mayor Dixon, when she was a school teacher, you could come into her class and you would see images of African-American sheroes and heroes in the class. I mean, and my daughter, who's an educator, you can come in her school. I mean, it got her in trouble because the first time she became principal, she has a big picture of Malcolm X behind her desk, and she had to deal with that. So I agree with your point that it's all about the will of the commissioners. What we have a tendency to do too much is we blame too much stuff on the superintendent or the CEO or whatever their name is at that time. All decisions are made in that commissioner room. The commissioners make the room. All the superintendent is an administrator. So unless we can now we're going to get 2 people elected this year. And I know a lot of us are going to Annapolis this year to lobby the Annapolis legislators so that we could add 4 more during the next city election. So yes, I hope we can, but I always try to tell folks, especially people of color, start having books around of your children, of images that look like them. And then they will absorb that. And Always Reading is one of the best nonprofits I know. They go into schools, especially Title I schools, and give away nothing but African-American history children books. That's it. That's all they give away. And they are now all across the country, from Chicago down to the islands. And they started right here in Baltimore City.
Hey, that's
Darius,
a great
just
answer,
an
Mike.
FYI, you should connect with Mike based on your books, because Mike can turn them books into a play and potentially connect you with making it a movie.
They were actually, I wrote a script already and I own the copyrights, but I couldn't do nothing with the script. So I transformed them into books so I can make money.
Yeah, somebody just sent me a script yesterday. So I just know places I can send them. And as Sheila, as the mayor has said, you make sure that as Michael forward our information, you get to me.
Absolutely. Darius, I really appreciate it. And Darius, I have one question for you before I let you go. And this isn't going to be your last time on this show. Hey, so I want to know, for the nation, for our cities, what's the #1 suggestion that you have for us to rehabilitate a gangster?
Reinvestment. It took reinvestment. Instead of reinvesting in stupid things, reinvest in education. I use money, and instead of blowing it on a bunch of stupid stuff, I went to North American Trade School and got a degree in welding, combination welding. And that led me getting jobs and staying at work. Just invest in yourself.
So we have to go in the streets, you're saying, and make meaningful jobs that are of quality, so that our young people have a chance to have a uplifted life. For instance, decent wage, decent living conditions, so that the streets aren't as attractive as a
We
regular,
must show
well-paying
them,
job. Is that what you're saying to
yes,
us?
we must show them that them jobs exist, because they don't see them jobs. They see the hand-in-hand jobs and the gun jobs. We need to show them jobs.
Darius, I appreciate you, brother. And listen, we're going to have you back, and you and I are going to talk at some point this week. But thanks a lot for coming in, Darius. Everyone, go to
Definitely.
Darius's email address, which I will
Wrote it
send
up.
again.
Yeah.
And look up Darius and that book that he wrote. Darius, proud of you, man. Keep doing what you're doing, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely.
So Mayor Dixon and Mike, we're down to the last 9 minutes, and we know that this show always starts and stops on time. If it's we could be talking about how to make $1 million, and if it goes past 7:01 when that answer comes out, we're gonna miss that $1 million, because I believe that that's what we do in terms of being considerate of other people's time. Hey, let's pivot for a minute to the economic aspect of it. And Darius said it relative to the economics in black communities. Most of the black cities, you look at Birmingham, you look at Detroit. Well, Detroit, not so much. Detroit has been a bit more gentrified as DC has been and Baltimore has been. But you look at these communities, and I've done a lot of research relative to the disparity in opportunities for minority contractors. So explain to me, in a city like Baltimore that's over 60% black, how can blacks be considered minorities when it comes to economics and the opportunity for contracts? Mayor Dixon, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, first, I don't think our numbers are still 60%. So
They're
we need to
62.
really,
At least, well, maybe you're right. It may
we need
be
to find out what
different.
the real numbers are, because as certain communities are being built up in this city, it's changing drastically. And the fact that we've lost over the last 20, 30 years now, you've lost a large percentage of middle class African Americans to Baltimore County, Howard County, Carroll County, Pennsylvania.
Happening all across the country.
Right.
Across the country.
But as relates to contracts and opportunities, finance is a big piece of that, and having access to capital. And that's where COVID was a prime example, where businesses were challenged and had to close as a result of, things being shut down. And then when the monies came out and people began to apply at their various banks, and Terrence Dixon, they'll tell you, bring him on your show. He created this group of micro businesses where he banked with this Bank of America for X amount of years and got turned down. Bank of America was one of the banks that was doing the redlining with the submortgages that put a lot of people into trouble with their homes. So access to capital is key, and not using people's personal assets, to make that happen. Having to almost literally put your children up for auction in order to get capital to get your business running.
So,
but then when you go ahead.
No, you go ahead and finish.
No, but then also when you get capital or resources, you got to put it back into the business and prioritize it. I'll give you an example. This young man who he was part of the streets. He's very good with masonry work and bricklaying and all of the stone. And I remember he came to me and asked me to help him to get certified. I helped him to get certified, with the city. He started getting some more jobs because I saw him on Drew Avenue doing some brickwork. So he got certified, was getting a couple contracts, started getting some money. So when he came back to me and said, "Hey, look, Mayor Dixon, where I am. I was working at MMCA." So he said, I bought a Cadillac. I said, "Why the hell you buy a Cadillac and not a truck for your business?" So once you start, getting access to opportunities, then you got to look at your business. You need a truck, not a Cadillac. You get that Cadillac or whatever kind of car you want after your business is established and you get employees. And I keep bringing up Robert Harrington for an example, he went to Northwestern for academics and he went to Westside Skills Center for plumbing. R. Harrington. Now he almost owns all of Howard Street, all of those buildings on Howard Street. He's the one who started the school. He does the underground utilities because he put his money back in the business and helps a lot of other smaller companies to get access. And I really encourage you to invite him on to one of your shows.
I absolutely will, and I have a mutual connection. But the casino and the casino money in many communities, was used as an opportunity to say that blacks would get access to capital based on the casino money and a pot of money coming into the city. But it just never seemed to happen. It seems as though we are more inclined to be subs than to be prime contractors. And someone of your stature as the mayor, was there a plan that you had for that? Or was there a plan that the mayor should have for that? The mayor of Baltimore, for instance, has the same issue where blacks are crying that they don't get an opportunity to have access to some of the lucrative contracts revolving around the city because the prime is locked up among people that seem to donate money to campaigns, and it's a pay-to-play situation. Is that true, you think?
Well, first of all, it all depends on who you are. I don't believe in the pay-to-play, and I know people try to pin you down with that. One of the things that I was trying to do, and that's part of why I'm out of office to this day, is on that Harbor East and other development, we couldn't require it by law, but what I did say was, when you bring a plan for development to the city, I want to see Black equity and Black investment in that deal. And I don't want you pick out a name and put them on there. I mean, I want to see their sweat, their money in that deal. And a lot of those guys didn't want to do that. A lot of them didn't want to. I remember the Marriott waterfront, and I have to give credit to Mr. Padarakis, who passed away, the bread man. When we said to him, to do that hotel, you have to have a Black partner, equity partner. Well, we discovered that he had a Black partner in the bakery business in, I think, Minnesota, somewhere in the Midwest, that was doing big business that he was able to get and invest in Baltimore. And then we said, okay, but let's take it a next step further. What local Black individuals you can get to invest? And that's where sometimes, and I'm a little critical of the President's Roundtable, the way it used to be, because they would speak out on things, but was all about, okay, I'm gonna speak out on this issue, but what am I gonna get out of this? Versus,
Got you.
You know what I mean? Like the Hilton.
Absolutely.
We said you got to have Black contractors who are part of this deal. We want to see individuals who are going to be able to provide services to this Hilton. You make it happen. And this was before I was city council president. I mean, before I was mayor, I was city council president. So I was able to use the legislative process as a tool. But what I get sick of is we talk this, but then I'm not going to put anybody under the bus, but I have several companies right now I'm dealing with that have some huge challenges as relates to not only the city and opportunities, but also the state. And so we got to watch the Maryland Stadium Authority. And I told every gubernatorial candidate that came to me to say, hey, would you support me? I said, that Maryland Stadium Authority piece has to change, because since it's quasi and it's got its own little governing, I could begin to tell you some horror stories about how they're screwing over Black businesses.
Well, you have to come back, Mayor. I'm going to give Mike Johnson. Mike, I'm going to give you the final thoughts. And some of what you're saying, Mayor Dixon, Mayor Langford out of Atlantic City, comparatively, same thing relative to state government, and theirs was structured like ours. But Mike Johnson, final thoughts, man. I know you and I are going to talk immensely and all the time, but final thoughts. Any final thoughts?
Well, I think that one of the things that in order to improve the city, we have to begin to improve the school system. And until we can put the proper curriculum and the proper things, I mean, the funniest thing for me is that we got 21st century schools, but we have no solar paneling on none of the schools. I mean, to think of that, you're a 21st century school, but you're not even operating in a 21st century one. I hope that someone does think about running again. I do. I just think that the city of Baltimore needs a leader, and I just don't think that we have the leadership in place right now. I think we have other people, leaders in place, not the leaders that I need to have for my community.
I absolutely agree with you, Michael. And, we didn't even get to my question about the Trump theory on elections being stolen, because from my perspective, we have a comparative here in Baltimore with 2 elections that I know this young lady was involved in. But we're out of time. Mayor Dixon, thank you
Well, let
so
me say
much
this
for being
though.
here. Go for it.
2016, it was clear. No ifs, ands, or buts. In the last one, I have to be straight with you. It was not, but because of COVID and because of 2 districts, it was because of the first district, predominantly white, and Michael's district. You still up in the Park Heights?
Yeah, I'm still up in 5.
Yeah. That now some sneaky stuff might have been going on up in 5 with your boy up there.
Oh yeah,
and his connection. But 16, it was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's why we challenged it in court.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
People went on deaf ears.
Absolutely. But Mayor Dixon, please, and I'm going to make you promise, because we had a huge following of you tonight. I'm going to make you promise to come back, particularly if I tape the show, so I don't take up your Sunday evening, because I've got 5 more questions from you that'll take probably another hour that people want to hear about, So would you promise to come back in the next couple months?
I definitely will. And I saw some of the questions on there about accountability with department heads. And I was reading some of their questions, which were good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got to get you back. And Mike, you and I are going to do this again too. Hey, everyone have a great week. Thank you so much. Thank you to Darius for coming on. And you all have a great, safe week, and happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate it, to everybody. See you
Same
later.
here.
Have a
Happy
great
holiday,
week.
everybody.
Thank you.
All right.